I used to think retirement would feel like freedom. No more early mornings, no more deadlines, just time to rest and enjoy life. And for a while, it was exactly that. I slept in, I took long walks, I sat on the porch and listened to the birds. But then something changed. The quiet that once felt peaceful started to feel a little too quiet. The days felt longer. I stopped checking the time. I stopped making plans. And slowly, I started asking myself a question I was not ready for. Now what? I had spent my whole life working, providing, solving problems, being needed. And then suddenly, no one was asking for anything. No one was waiting for me to show up. It was just me. If you have felt that too, I want you to know something. You are not alone, and more importantly, you are not done. Retirement is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of a new chapter. One where you get to choose what matters. One where your health, your time, and your heart become your greatest tools. Today, I want to share how I started finding purpose again, through simple steps, small changes, and a shift in how I saw myself. Let's begin. 1. The silent space. After the first few weeks of retirement, I began to notice something I had not expected. At first, everything felt like a break I had long deserved. I enjoyed my morning coffee without rushing. I stayed in my pajamas longer than I probably should have. I watched the news from beginning to end, and I even started a puzzle that had been sitting on my shelf for 2 years. It felt good to finally slow down. But then came the shift. Slowly and almost silently, the feeling of freedom started to change. The quiet that once felt peaceful began to feel empty. The days that felt relaxing now seemed long. Too long. I began to lose track of what day it was. Monday looked like Thursday. Saturday felt like Tuesday. I stopped making plans, not because I did not want to, but because I had no real reason to. No meetings, no deadlines. No one really needed me for anything. I remember one afternoon, I was sitting on the couch. The television was on, but I was not really watching. I had a bag of chips in my hand, and I had eaten most of it without realizing. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The house was completely silent, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. I looked around and thought to myself, is this what the rest of my life will look like? That moment stayed with me, not because it was dramatic or emotional, but because it was so still. Too still. There was no problem to solve, no task to complete, no one calling my name. For someone who had always been active, responsible, and depended on, it was a strange kind of silence. It felt like the world had moved on, and I was just sitting in place, watching it from the sidelines. I began to feel something that surprised me. Invisible. Not in a sad or dramatic way, but in a slow, creeping way. Like I had become background noise in my own life. People were kind, of course. Friends still called every now and then. My daughter checked in when she could, but I no longer felt essential. And when a person stops feeling essential, something inside starts to dim. I also noticed my body was changing faster than I expected. Without the routine of work, I was moving less. I sat more. My knees started aching when I stood up. I did not sleep as well. I felt tired during the day, even though I had nowhere to go. I was not doing anything wrong, really. I was just drifting. And then came the question I had been avoiding, the one that no one really prepares you to ask. What is my life for now? I was no longer building a career. I had raised my family. I had paid off the house. So, what now? What gives me a reason to wake up, get dressed, and step outside? It was not an easy question to sit with. In fact, it made me uncomfortable. But looking back, I believe that moment was the beginning of something new. Because when we get quiet enough to hear the discomfort, we also start to hear the invitation to grow again, to discover again, to become something new, not because we have to, but because we can. Retirement does not erase your value. It reveals it, but only if you are willing to listen. And that is what I started doing next. Tier 2. Small changes, big shifts. After that quiet afternoon on the couch, I did not have any kind of breakthrough. There was no big moment of clarity. No one came knocking at my door with a new mission in life. But something inside me, something small, started to shift. Not in a loud way, but in a gentle, persistent whisper. It said, "Try something different. Just move." The very next morning, I put on my shoes and walked to the end of the street. That is all I did. I did not time it. I did not track my steps. I just walked until I saw the mailbox at the corner, and then I turned around and came back. It took me less than 10 minutes. My knees were stiff. My breathing was uneven. But when I walked back into the house, I felt awake. Just a little, but enough to notice. The following morning, I did the same thing. This time, I went 2 houses farther. I started to notice the trees, the cracks in the sidewalk, a woman across the street watering her plants. These things had always been there, but I had not seen them. I was too busy being still, being disconnected. And now I was slowly returning to life just by walking. What surprised me most was how quickly my mood began to shift. After a few days of walking, I started sleeping better. I woke up feeling a little clearer. I made a real breakfast instead of grabbing whatever was nearby. I added a few stretches before bed. I began drinking more water. These were not major lifestyle changes, but they were signs. Signs that I had not given up on myself, that I was still capable of showing up. It reminded me that our bodies are not separate from our purpose. They are part of it. When we move, even gently, we tell ourselves that we still belong in this world. We say, "I am here. I am present. I matter." And that feeling of mattering was something I had not felt in a long time. That shift in energy began to open up other parts of me. One morning, my granddaughter Emma came over while her mom ran errands. She brought her school books and asked for help with a project about family history. We sat at the table for over an hour, looking at old photos, telling stories, laughing at how I used to wear my hair. That hour reminded me of something powerful. I still had stories to tell. I still had knowledge to share. And she was listening. That one small moment with her did something I did not expect. It woke something up in me that had been quiet for too long. A sense of purpose, not the kind that fills calendars or checks off big goals, but a soft, steady purpose. A reason to show up, a reason to move, a reason to care. From that day forward, I made a simple promise to myself. Move my body a little every day and connect with someone, anyone, at least once a week. Whether it was a neighbor, a phone call to a friend, or helping my niece with her taxes, those small actions kept me from slipping back into that heavy silence. You do not need a big plan to feel alive again. You do not need to join a gym or become a volunteer superstar. You just need to choose one small thing and say yes to it. One walk, one stretch, one phone call. That is where it begins. Because purpose does not return in a flood. It returns in drops. Quiet, small, powerful drops that slowly remind you, you are not done yet. Through 3, moments that matter. As I continued those small steps, walking, eating better, reaching out to people, I started to notice that something else was changing. Not just my body, not just my sleep, but the way I was thinking, the way I was seeing myself. I had spent so many years being defined by my job, my responsibilities, and the people who needed me. I was a provider, a problem solver, a steady hand. And when all of that went quiet, I thought my worth had gone quiet too. But now I was beginning to understand something I had never really made time to think about before. Value does not disappear when the job title is gone. It just shifts. It becomes more personal, more relational. It becomes about the moments you create, not just the work you do. One of those moments happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. My neighbor, Paul, who I had not talked to much before, knocked on my door. He was holding a small toolbox and asked if I could help him fix a loose cabinet door. Nothing major, just something he could not quite figure out on his own. I said yes, of course. We spent maybe 30 minutes together in his kitchen. We talked about wood glue and hinge screws. Nothing deep, nothing life-changing. But after we finished, he looked at me and said, "Thanks. It just feels good to have someone to figure things out with." That stuck with me, because I knew exactly what he meant. I began to realize how many people around me were feeling the same way I had been feeling. A little disconnected, a little forgotten, still capable, but unsure of how or where to show up. So I made a quiet decision. I would be someone who shows up, not with grand gestures, not because I had all the answers, but simply because I could. A cup of coffee with an old friend, a phone call to a cousin I had not spoken to in years, helping someone carry groceries, joining the community center just to talk with other people who understood the pace of this stage of life. And slowly, those little moments added up. They began to stitch together something I had been missing. Connection. Not the busy kind. Not the kind tied to productivity or achievement. But real human connection. The kind that reminds you you are seen. You are heard. You still belong. One of the most meaningful shifts for me came when I stopped thinking of purpose as a big idea. I stopped chasing some perfect new mission and started paying attention to how I felt when I was helping, listening, laughing, or simply being present. Purpose, I discovered, is often quiet. It lives in the way you sit with someone who is grieving, the way you share a story with a child, the way you walk into a room and make someone feel less alone. These are not small things. They are everything. And when I began showing up in these ways, something else happened. I started feeling proud of myself again. Not because I was achieving anything measurable, but because I was living in alignment with who I wanted to be in this season of life. I did not have to be the busiest person in the room. I just had to be the most present, the most grounded, the most willing to care. That is what purpose looks like now, and it is more than enough. 4. Redefining purpose. When I was younger, I used to think purpose had to be something big, something impressive. I thought it was about career goals, financial success, building something that would last. And for many years, that version of purpose kept me moving forward. It kept me focused and driven. But retirement has a way of asking a different kind of question. It is not, what can you build? It is, who are you becoming? At first, I did not know how to answer that. Without my old routine, without coworkers or meetings or deadlines, I felt like I was floating. But over time, I began to understand something that changed me deeply. Purpose does not have to be loud. It does not have to be a second career or a new business or a list of goals. Sometimes, purpose is soft, quiet. It looks like presence. It feels like peace. I started noticing how I felt after certain days. The days when I took care of myself, when I walked, ate a real meal, called someone I loved, those were the days I felt most alive. Not busy, not productive, just alive. And then there were the days when I did not move, when I stayed inside, skipped breakfast, stared at a screen too long. Those were the days I felt heavier, not just in my body, but in my spirit. That awareness helped me reshape the way I lived. I stopped trying to chase a big mission. Instead, I began to ask myself one simple question every morning. What is one small thing I can do today that feels meaningful? Sometimes, the answer was taking a walk in the fresh air. Sometimes, it was calling my sister just to hear her voice. Other times, it was sitting down with my journal and writing a few thoughts. Nothing polished, just honest. And some days, I honestly did not feel like doing anything. On those days, I gave myself grace. Because purpose is not about constant motion. It is about intentional living. Even rest can be purposeful if it helps you return to life with clarity. What surprised me most was how this quiet approach to purpose began to affect my health. I was not exercising to meet a goal. I was moving to feel better. I was not dieting to lose weight. I was simply choosing foods that gave me more energy and fewer aches. The pressure was gone. In its place was compassion. For myself, for my aging body, for my very real need to slow down and still be strong. I began sleeping deeper. I smiled more. I laughed more freely. I found myself looking people in the eye again, instead of walking past them with my head down. It felt like returning, not to who I was before, but to who I was becoming now. Purpose is not a race. It is not a competition. It is not measured by how much you achieve in a day. It is about how fully you live inside that day. Whether that means helping someone, creating something, listening closely, or simply taking care of yourself in a way that honors the life you have lived. This stage of life is not about proving anything. It is about experiencing everything, slowly, deeply, and with heart. That, to me, is the new definition of purpose. 5. Health is purpose. 2. One of the biggest lessons I have learned in this stage of life is that health is not just about numbers. It is not just about how much you weigh, or what your blood pressure says, or how many pills are lined up in your organizer. Health is about how you feel when you wake up in the morning. It is about your energy, your outlook, and your ability to enjoy the day ahead. For a long time, I separated health and purpose. I thought of them as two different things. Purpose was about doing something meaningful. Health was just maintenance, something I had to manage. But slowly, I began to see how deeply connected they are. When I feel good in my body, when I am moving regularly, eating well, sleeping peacefully, I notice that I am more open. I am more curious. I reach out to people more. I have the energy to help someone, to listen with patience, to say yes when a neighbor invites me to something. My sense of purpose is stronger when my body is being cared for. The opposite is also true. On days when I neglect my health, when I skip meals or stay sedentary for too long, I start to disconnect. I get tired more easily. I avoid conversations. I slip back into that feeling of just drifting through the day. I do not feel purposeful. I feel invisible again. Taking care of myself is no longer just about adding years to my life. It is about adding life to my years. I do not need to run marathons or become a fitness guru, but I do stretch in the morning. I walk after dinner. I choose foods that help me feel light and clear, not heavy and sluggish. These small choices do not seem heroic, but they are. Because every time I care for myself, I am saying, my life is still worth showing up for. And I will be honest, it took me time to stop feeling guilty about making my health a priority. I was raised in a generation that prided itself on toughness. We worked through pain. We skipped rest. We put others first, always. But now I understand that taking care of myself does not take away from others. In fact, it allows me to give more, to be more, to love more fully. My granddaughter once said something that I still think about. She was watching me do my morning stretches, and she said, "Grandpa, I want to be strong like you when I get old." I smiled, but later I sat with those words, because strength at this age is not about lifting heavy things. It is about resilience. It is about the choice to keep showing up, to keep caring for your body even when it is slower or stiffer or more fragile than it used to be. There is a quiet kind of dignity in that, a strength that comes not from muscle, but from commitment, from deciding that your health is not just about survival, it is about service. When I am well, I can serve. I can listen. I can share my wisdom. I can be there for the people I love, not as a burden, but as a blessing. So now I treat my walks like a gift. I eat with gratitude, not guilt. I rest when I need to, without apology. And I remember that my health is not something separate from my purpose. It is the foundation of it. Because you can't pour from an empty cup. And life, even in its later chapters, is still meant to be lived fully. 6. From me to you. If you are still here listening, I want to take a quiet moment to say this. I see you. Maybe you are retired. Maybe you are close to it. Maybe you are in that in-between space where life feels uncertain and slower than you expected. Maybe you feel like your name is not called as often. Maybe the house is too quiet. Maybe you are not sure what the next chapter looks like. I have been there. I still visit that space sometimes. It is easy to feel like your time of contribution is over, like the world is focused on younger voices and faster lives. But that is not the truth. The truth is that we need your presence now more than ever. Your experience, your calm, your wisdom, your patience. These are things only time can teach, and you, my friend, have lived enough time to know what really matters. The older I get, the more I understand that purpose is not something we chase. It is something we practice. We practice it in how we show up, in how we take care of ourselves, in how we treat others, even in simple ways. A kind word, a gentle smile, a listening ear. These are not small gestures. These are acts of purpose. You do not need to find something new to prove your worth. You already have it. It is in your story. It is in your hands. It is in the way you make someone feel safe, just by being yourself. That is not past your prime. That is your prime. If no one has told you this lately, let me say it now as clearly as I can. You are not done. You are not too old. You are not invisible. You are still here, and that means there is still more life to be lived. Not just passed through, but truly lived, with attention, with care, with meaning. I do not know what your next step looks like. It might be something as small as a short walk tomorrow morning, or calling someone you have not spoken to in a while, or picking up a book you loved years ago, or simply making yourself a proper breakfast and eating it slowly with gratitude. Whatever it is, I encourage you to start with just one small act of intention, one thing that reminds you that this day, this breath, this body you live in still holds value. Because it does, and because you do. So if you have 5 more good years, or 10 or 20, how will you spend them? What stories do you still want to tell? What people do you still want to love? What kind of peace do you still want to give and receive? Think about it. Write it down if you like. Or say it out loud. Or share it in the comments if this is a space where you feel safe. Someone else might read your words and find the courage to take their next step too. Thank you for spending this time with me. It means more than you know. If this message spoke to your heart, I hope you will carry it with you. And when the day feels slow or heavy, I hope you will remember this simple truth. You are not done yet.